I think we should invite Spider-Man to the Epoch team. I hear he's good at web design.
Working smarter, not harder. How using your brain can propel you into superheroism.
You get a superpower, and you get a superpower, and you get a superpower. Everyone gets superpowers.
Are superpowers something that we need to learn or simply remember?
Like Mark Twain said, truth is stranger than fiction because fiction is required to stick to possibilities. Truth isn't.
Look, up in the sky. It's a bird. It's a plane. No, it's just George flying home from work.
Welcome to the Epoch Podcast, your weekly dose of mental foreplay. I'm Matt.
I'm Jen.
I'm Austin.
I'm Kat.
I'm Christina.
I'm David.
And this week we're talking about superheroes. And I think it's a cool topic if you think of it in the context of it's an idea that's been with us for a long time. Going back to the ancient days, maybe people are thinking more about superheroes in the context of gods, passed down through oral tradition or written tradition. Later it transformed into comic books, and now they grace our screens, Netflix, movie theaters, whatever. But maybe there's more. Maybe they grace our streets and our neighborhoods as well. What do you guys think?
Well, I know that, I don't know if you guys ran across it, but there's a real-life superheroes project that it's not like actual superpowers. It's just they dress up as heroes and go around doing, philanthropic type things, helping society, but dressing up as a way to, I guess, kind of promote just doing cool stuff, and it kind of maybe disarms people a little bit, like breaks the ice or something. I don't know.
So you're not talking about taking like the Batmobile to a children's hospital. You're talking about something else.
I'm talking about like people that dress up in costumes, and there's like a gallery of these superheroes.
Like Comic-Con?
No.
Cosplay?
No.
They made their own superhero identity. They made a costume for it. They quote what their superpowers are. Like they made up what their superpowers are in relation to like helping people, basically.
That's kind of cool.
Anyway, I'll link it in my article, but that's not really what we're talking about. Yeah, the crossing guys.
Well, and I think our society is so transfixed on superheroes and getting bit by a spider and being able to do crazy things, or having lots of money and being able to have these gadgets and to save people. And that was really kind of the springboard for our research this week, was to see if there's any real life people going on that are doing superhero things, or if there's some crazy formula that we could mix together to become a superhero. So I'm kind of curious how everyone's research went along this week on that topic.
I have another question of clarification too. In that same way, are we classifying superheroes and superpowers? Are we throwing in people like Jesus Christ, or the apostles, and the ability to heal and stuff like that? Is that included in this discussion?
I think that's up to the researcher there, Sir Austin.
I think that I approached this as looking into superpowers, not superheroes. So
I don't know. The podcast
I did too.
event was named Superheroes, but yes, I definitely thought about it in superpowers. Oh no, maybe it wasn't. Maybe. Regardless, I thought both directions.
Everybody go back.
Not all around.
Try again.
See you next
We'll do this
week.
again next week.
I mean, to answer your question, Austin, I guess if there's a superhero who's like, well, I can turn water into wine, I'd be like, sweet, bro.
Mhm.
Prove it.
Right.
Prove it.
Like he could walk on water. He could relocate.
Oh, okay.
That's a pretty big deal.
Heal people by spitting on them or something, right?
Yeah, he spit on him.
Spit in your face.
Red.
And you can say,
So is your question kind of more about identity and abilities, or because I think in that sense, Jesus, if he were to come walking down the street today, I would be like, you're a superhero because you can change water into water and you can bring people from the dead and you have these abilities. So is that kind of what you're asking as well?
Yeah, I guess, because to me, when you people's minds, we like to make classifications. right? And so when I think of spiritual power, I think of healers, and I think of people like Jesus. And then suddenly it's like, oh, but Iron Man, that's different. And sure, but I don't know if it's necessarily, especially when you consider supernatural abilities such as walking on water or the ability to fly or transrelocate or whatever. I would argue that that is 100% spiritual power. As far as I currently understand it, I can't do any of those things yet, so I can't.
Really?
I can't speak from a level of authority. Splash. I have performed miracles, but I've not walked on water or transrelocated. So,
Well, and I
but I'm
kind of
thinking they're spiritual.
we've talked about digital age for numerous accounts.
A month and a half.
But then thinking about, in those discussions, we talked about longevity and having technology boost us forward. And we've talked about all these things that the digital AI stuff is going to enhance us. And so in my mind, like, even though we have that supernatural abilities, like maybe technology plays a part in getting us over into being able to walk on water. First, we're going to have walking shoes, and we have to figure out the science behind it to make it become a natural law to us.
That was something that I had been thinking about, like the progression of how stuff might become just like normal, and thinking about how it needs to become, well, for so long, like, yeah, we've generally kind of just segmented the parts of ourselves, like, this is spiritual stuff, this is natural stuff. You need special, like, giftings or something to have, like, superpowers or super the spiritual stuff. And things are becoming, like, people that, I don't know, we talked in another podcast about stuff not necessarily being spiritual, but just like logical. And I still have the frame of reference, like, it's spiritual. It's because I've always had that frame of reference that something is spiritual. But I think that we might start to see things like, for example, quantum physics is starting to show scientific evidence or understanding of the way things are connected that we can't necessarily see. Stuff like that I think we're going to start maybe seeing science and spirituality, or natural and spiritual, start to kind of mesh into one. I feel like we're going to become, or I feel like we kind of need to become, like, more one-minded in how we approach these kinds of things in order to be able to start to see them. Yeah,
I agree. One of the things that I was looking at is, like, genetic mutations that allow, like, superhuman abilities. And there's one guy, I don't want to even try to pronounce that word right now, but it essentially makes it possible for him to carry 50% more oxygen in his blood, which gives him, like, super endurance. And so if we can understand that scientifically,
right,
I think that a lot of what holds us back from being able to do things is our beliefs that we can't, our beliefs that we're brought up with, that you can only hold your breath for this long, yet we have people that are breaking or shattering those records left and right, like the humans that can only lift a certain amount of weight until somebody does it because they were lied to, I guess, that it was lighter, which was on a previous podcast. They could figure that out. But yeah, I think beliefs are going to play a huge role in that, which is tying in the science and the spirituality, like figuring out how a body would be able to do that, or how, like, a human could breathe underwater without technology, possibly.
I think one of the other things I ran into, I'm curious if you guys ran into something like this, or other things like this, like you said, the breathing thing. Supposedly, people with O negative blood type are generally more, like, psychic or clairvoyant or prophetic, or, like, those kinds of things. They seem to be more tuned into the spiritual side of things. I don't know. I was running into that a couple different places, and that's interesting to me. Nobody else saw stuff like that.
I didn't see anything that, but in my spiritual studies, I now need to go look at that because scripturally speaking, the life is in the blood, and the identification of how many different blood types, and anyway, that's a whole nother rabbit trail for myself.
Yeah.
But.
So I've heard, kind of a distinction being made between spiritual superhero or spiritual superpowers, technological superpowers. What are some examples, like, with explanations behind them of what you guys would consider spiritual superpowers?
I feel like all the explanations tend to be like conscious thought and practice and meditation and all that kind of stuff. So it tends to, I don't think I ran across anything else much other, obviously then faith. I feel like faith is the like fast way to get to something sometimes, but most people haven't really been able to, I feel like, pin that down super well. But people that meditate and, I ran across a guy, Ken Wilber, who he has like some sort of a machine that measures his brainwaves, and you can see the lights on the machine that he can control through different types of meditation very quickly, what his brain is doing, like what waves, what state he's in, I guess. And it's really interesting. I'm going to put that in my article too, just to see the different levels of brainwaves that he goes through without like hardly any time. It's crazy.
On a fun note on that, they have like apps now and devices that you can, for residential use or personal use, that you can like track your brainwaves and your meditation states, and it kind of rewards you audibly as you're meditating, and like how you're able to manipulate those waves.
Yeah.
One of our mutual biohacking friends is really into that.
That's cool.
That's interesting, because to me, I feel like if I was meditating and I was rewarded with a dong or whatever, then that would kind of.
Wow.
I would definitely meditate way more often.
Reward paradigm here.
It would.
You're not editing that out.
I'm keep going, guys.
I think we should really camp out right here.
It would influence the.
It would influence your ability and your process.
Yes, it would. If it would. I think my consciousness would kick in and would try to take over something that my subconscious was trying to tell me in my meditation. That's what I'm trying to say.
I mean, reward is probably a bad way to say it. It's more along the lines of like, as you shift through certain stages, like the audible action just changes. So if it goes from waves, the waves get bigger and whatnot. They crash, whatever. I don't know.
Oh yeah, you can get more focused in. Actually, David.
So not so much dong though. But
you know what I was trying to say.
Anybody with any non-dong related thoughts?
I have some thoughts that rhyme with dong. I was looking into qigong, and man, all I can, hold on.
Just stuck on dong still, or
just
what?
dongs.
I mean, some people. I mean, I don't want. Are we eliminating dong from superpowers here, or just?
I mean, I wouldn't. Anyway, qigong, qi and the energy of the body. People, I mean, of course, video and those video accounts and stuff like that can be doctored. So I haven't seen it in person to be able to vouch for it, but like I've seen numerous different types of videos where people start fires with their hands because of building up and then channeling the energy, like that can't remember the word for it. I'm going to write it down. The currents, the electrical currents in your body. and then creating heat in the hand and focusing it on like newspaper or dry grass or something like that, and starting a fire. And like sending off like electrical shocks with their body at different elixir field points or dantians in their body. And that's something I'm going to look into personally because it sounds like
very
something.
Do you have need of
Good idea.
fire starting?
I actually
Always.
did see a video of a guy that could do that.
Yeah, I did too.
Mm.
But again, we live in the time where stuff can be doctored so easily. The thing that I saw, I don't really feel like was doctored, but
I don't know. I thought that the one I saw was a Russian guy, and he was like on shows and stuff like that.
Mm.
He could put out something like 5 volts or something.
Well, I also saw someone manipulating the wind in a way that I feel like would be hard to. Well, they can do anything with the right editing, but it wouldn't have been like an amateur edit, I guess. That's what I was thinking.
I felt like there was a lot of sifting through BS on this one.
Yeah.
There was for sure.
Which
So-
I'm surprised, but go on, Austin.
So for me, like you guys heard of Indigo children?
Mm-hmm.
The concept of Indigo children?
Negative.
Oh my gosh. Well, don't. It's just pointless. No. So the idea of Indigo children is certain people that were born in the 80s and 90s, and then you got like crystal children that were in the 90s, and then like rainbow children that are in the 2000s. And they're all supposed to be, they're called starseeds because they come from other planets, and their souls come from like Pleiades or Sirius and all this stuff. Yeah, and they're all from different star systems. Okay.
Wow.
And the idea is that there's a massive wave of soul volunteers who are here to raise the vibration of the planet.
Sounds legit.
And so I went to, I'd heard of, come again?
I said it sounds legit.
Yeah.
Do they do that at Coachella?
That's where they go.
Well, there was a point where like Indigo Children and stuff was like on CNN, and they were doing interviews on ABC, all the different
There's a
news
lot of
stations
books
and
on
everything. So this whole idea of Indigo Children or like these special kids, I had heard that there was a lot of kids with special abilities. And when I started digging into it, it was like, you might be an Indigo child if you have intuition. and if sometimes you think you know what other people might be feeling. I'm like, that's called empathy, dumbass. Like, just everything I found was like, dude, anybody can do this stuff.
Human.
Like, you don't have to be a special star baby to, increase your ability to understand. I mean,
But what if that concept is kind of, well, we won't get into other things that were these big, huge things that were really just an idea that needed to be planted for someone to like, oh, I am special. And like it goes back to the beliefs holding us back from being able to do that. And if you can present someone with a full-fledged identity, like, oh, if you can do this, this, and this, and this, then you're special. And you can do this and this if you work at it or whatever. Like if you're offering that identity, people can step into it and pick that up. And even though it's every fucking person.
it's and that's the double-edged sword, because we know it's every person.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people, like, Jesus was special. You could never be like Jesus. Really? Because he said that Scripture says he was the first
cooler
of
than
many.
him. Yeah, that we would be even cooler than him.
Right, and that there would be greater works to be done. But you can't convince 99% of Christians that they could do what Jesus did, right? Because I'm not Jesus. And so the idea of people being special, or and that's like, okay, so X-Men is kind of what we're talking about, but you have to win the genetic lottery, right? Or you're Harry Potter, you have to win the genetic lottery. You have to be born into a wizarding family. On a rare occasion, I know that they had concepts for people who had no magical parents and you were just born magical, but you still had to be born magical. Like, and so these ideas that are out there in the superhero world, you either need an accident to become a superhero, you need to be super smart or super rich, you need to be born into it, like it needs to be in your DNA, and not everybody does it. And I think for me, when I look at this entire concept, one of the big things that I wish people would understand is, look, this is a natural birthright of humanity, is to be able to do certain things, and we could go through a list, but that you don't have to be special in the sense of you are special. Like, everyone has their uniqueness, and I think you have your natural bents. And I watched a movie. I don't know if you guys ever seen the lady who talks to animals. Mm-hmm. She there's a really cool just Google or YouTube, like lady
it's
talks
like a
to
real lady, right?
Yeah, Diablo.
Yeah.
Like the Panthers
tiger, or
yeah, and she taught, and he like went into a conservation center and was like super angry, super difficult, and they couldn't figure out, and they were going to have to, like, it's a conservation center, but he wouldn't get out of his cage. It was freaking 400 acres of free land, and he wouldn't move. He just stayed in his cage and would try to kill the people who would feed him and everything. Just super negative experience for him. And they tried to help him, and then finally they brought this lady over, and she had like a 15-minute conversation with him, was telling the people, like, so where he came from, there was 2 cubs in the cage next to him, and they're like, how did you know that? Like, well, he told me, like, and he's really concerned about those 2 cubs. Like, and so, like, yeah, right? And he doesn't like his name. His name was Diablo, and he's like, he wants his name is Spirit. Right? And so, like, after 15 minutes of talking to this panther, and she uses mental pictures to send mental pictures to the animals, and then the animals send mental pictures back. And so she's learned to cultivate the skill, and within 15 minutes, he was there for like months. Within 15 minutes, he left his cage and was normal and totally cool.
Dude, that's awesome.
Right? So, but anyone can do that. You can make a mental picture, can't you? Right? And I'm sure you might.
Can't.
Well,
yeah.
maybe, and some people can't. But you have bents, and you have things that are available to you. And I'm thoroughly convinced that the only thing keeping you from whatever superpower you want is your desire for it and the belief that you can actually achieve it. But
in practice,
that's a little bit more, a
So
little more Tony Robbins than we need right now, I guess.
really,
So-
I think it's just the right amount of Tony Robbins.
doesn't he make people walk on coals or something?
Yep.
He does.
There's
Firewalk.
another
I'm gonna
superpower.
do that.
You get a superpower. You get a superpower.
What were you gonna say?
What I was gonna say was,
Everyone.
is there or actually maybe Austin would go into this, but the mechanics of it,
What?
of superpowers. Like,
Mm.
why do you say that everybody can get it?
Mm.
Like, would you be able to kind of unpack that a little bit,
Please.
please?
Right. So, oh boy, your life is a perfect reflection of your beliefs. And I definitely don't have time to unpack that aspect of it. But if you've never studied law of attraction, if you don't have a Christian background, then I could say, well, the Bible says that all things are possible through Christ who strengthens you. Well, if anything is true, there's a way in which it is true, and that is true. But you may not believe the Bible. So there's plenty of other resources that you can get to realize the reality that your beliefs create your life. And we have believed in sickness, we have believed in death, we have believed in decay, we have believed in poverty, we have believed in pain, and we have created a world in which we dwell, where we measure our joy and our happiness by everything that happens outside of us. And therefore, we essentially live in squalor compared to what many ascendant masters from the past, and Jesus himself, which to me, he's the greatest ascendant master, what they've all said is that you could dwell in heaven. You could live in a place where it is what is inside that it creates your reality, that the kingdom of heaven is within you, and then is at hand. So that is the spiritual principle to realizing, and when I say just so matter-of-factly that anybody can do it, the question is, what do you believe? Now, there are absolute mechanics when it comes to faith and intent. I have dedicated my life to the study of this stuff, and it's simple, but it's not easy, right? The faith and intent and the simplicity of it is actually something that you've probably heard 1,000 times, from Yoda to every hero's journey movie you've ever seen, to your spiritual teachers or any books you've read or any YouTube videos you've watched. It's pretty simple to realize that it's faith and intent, but the mechanics of it, of your internal world, are so specialized that my best advice is to find a teacher or have such a passionate hunger that nobody can stop you. So is that close to what you were asking, David?
Yeah. I was going to add there to that Jesus does say that specifically in Matthew, and this is one of my points, in Matthew, 17:20, when he was, when his disciples were trying to cast out a demon and they couldn't, and Jesus is like, for goodness sakes, all you need is a little bit of faith to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And then he says, the faith the size of a mustard seed, and then he says, you'll tell the mountain to move. And then the last little bit of that passage is, nothing will be impossible to you.
Yes.
So the idea there is he almost expected them to be able to do that, and obviously just have a little bit of faith. And so I kind of felt like when we started talking about this stuff, we were kind of like made the assumption that everybody was a little bit in the same level of understanding. Well, obviously we would have all this stuff, we would be able to do all this stuff ourselves. And so I kind of wanted to bring people up to speed who weren't necessarily up to speed.
Right on.
I mean, we've had these conversations in the basement. Like that, so
The basement.
It's
It's like the Bat Cave.
Yes.
Do we want to? Oh,
the shack.
Jen's talking.
The basement shack.
Jen's-
Never mind. Sorry.
I think it's difficult because everyone wants this formula. They want to do step 1, step 2, step 3, and then they have superpowers. And that's not it's never going to be the case. People will look at what Jesus did, and I'm going to replicate everything that Jesus did. And with this faith, I will be like Jesus. But we forget that Jesus lived in a different time. He had a different cultural experience. He had different knowledges. He had different things influencing his life. And even the people on this call, we all bring something different to the table. So we all have to know ourselves inside. And that's why the Bible says meditate on it day and night, because you can look at these things and you can say, that's what I'm going to do. But unless you really know it and believe it and have that faith for it, so you can say, I'm going to walk on water. I'm going to walk on water. But until you drop it down and it becomes this effortless flow of, when I walk out on that river, I'm going to walk on the water. Like, I don't even think about it. It's just, that's who I am. That's pumping through my vein, is that I am this flotation device, So that's the difference of what we're trying to get at here. Because we all think in our heads, yes, I want these things and I want to have these powers to do X, Y, and Z. But to really just have it ingrained into our DNA so much that you don't have to think about it. Like, that's the formula, and it looks different for everybody.
I think
that sounds like step 1 and step 2 already. I think we come up with one. It's just going to have to be tailor made.
Mm-hmm.
But this stuff, these ideas of unlocking special abilities and stuff like that, they're not necessarily. I mean, we find them in other places, and especially like I was watching a video about Shaolin monks and how they can do all this weird stuff with their bodies, and they'll say it's not on top of physical exercise, but a lot of it is also meditation and things like that. So it's not like it's not like we're just saying, oh, it's just a Christian thing or whatever.
I think it's a human thing.
Right. Greg Braden has a in one of his one of the videos on the Epoch, right?
I don't know what you're going.
The one
for.
where he was like, he had a video, and they had, was it an MRI video or something like that of a tumor, and there were monks, and they were chanting something about it is already, or something.
Already healed.
It's already healed. Already healed. And you can see through the MRI video, the tumor just disappears. And he was saying, you know, and it was actually kind of funny because it was his teaching on prayer, on the mechanics of prayer and stuff like that. So, I mean, super interesting, but not just, you know, one religion over another or something like that. Go for it.
Do we want to take a second to kind of just, because we've talked about superpowers, but do we want to talk about what we in this conversation are considering superpowers? Like, we haven't really, like, what are the capabilities? Like, what are we talking about? Like, what should we be able to do?
Do you mean like really specific stuff? Because that could be a lot of things.
I mean, even just in general, should we be able to fly? Should we be able to walk on water or heal people by walking past them, or like super strength or echolocation or
I think if you want it, then yeah, you can totally have it. Because I can tell you, I have no desire to fly, but if I can close my eyes and be on the other side of the world, heck yeah. So those things are capable, but it's all up to the individual and their belief.
Oh, for sure. I just mean, like, have some, to have some foundation of what we're even talking about. Because I mean, they could think that we're talking about shooting webs from our wrists or something. So, which.
Wow.
I think something that I researched or Googled at least for half a second, I know Matt has more concrete evidence, was if I could become a Jedi and use all those Jedi powers, then that's something that I would love to have, being able to have that intuition and oneness with the overall world globally, and then being able to float things and make things disappear and do one-handed push-ups with a little green guy on my back. I don't know.
Living the dream.
Living the dream.
So yeah.
I feel like something that sets me back, at least, is thinking that it needs to be practiced, and I need to have time, and I need to create rituals to get in the right mindset daily. And I know that it doesn't need to take a lot of time, and it doesn't need to be like per day, particularly. It doesn't need to be like huge amounts of, well, at least I don't think it does. I don't believe it does. But I still have in the back of my mind like that notion that, well, I'm going to get around to it someday when I have more time. And that's stupid, but that's where I'm still at personally.
I think that goes to the individual beliefs. Like, if you believe that it's going to take practice, so you're going to have to do it when you have more time, then it will.
Right.
If someone believes that they could do it right now, then they can. Like, if they truly, like, just say it.
And I think that, though, that comes down to having an understanding of your identity, because if you don't already have that, I feel like, fleshed out in your mind, that you have the identity that you can do that, then you can't do it right away. I think if I would focus, that's probably the best place to start for me, at least, is focusing on what my identity is every day and making it more of a larger reality in my mind, I guess, so that I could do something quickly, as opposed to focusing on the individual thing to do, the individual skill or whatever, perhaps.
It's interesting because you said you didn't think creating rituals was part of the process, and that was actually part of my research and what I'm going to dive to in my.
No, I said I feel like it is part of the process.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
well, I do too. So,
or I feel like it's helpful, at least.
Definitely, and I think because as much as I want to say I can just go do something, if someone's got a bone sticking out their arm, like, you're healed, like, I don't have the faith for that right now, just to be completely honest and open. Like, I can't just popped it back in, like, and so for me, creating that vision of what is it that I want, and then putting words to it, and then setting up rituals for myself, and it's little things throughout the day. So it's not like I'm sitting and meditating for 45 minutes every day, because again, who has time for that? But it's like little things like when I'm washing my hands, I think about like I have the soap in my hands and the water's running it off, and like, all right, all the bad grime or whatever for the day is washing off of me, and I'm clean again and I'm whole. And so taking little things like that, and when I go outside and the wind is blowing through me, it's like fresh brush. Say it.
Breath of fresh
There
air.
you go. That's what I'm looking for. So it's little things like that where it's just then intentionality, and then all of a sudden it could become second nature, and then you're able to pop that bone back in.
Just adding it into the natural parts every day. Yeah, that makes
Yes.
a lot of sense.
So you're not there yet, but there's somebody in this call that I would probably say is
true.
there right now, has had
Right.
some practical application when it comes to miracles of healing. I don't know if they feel like chiming up, but the floor is there.
The floor. Who is this? No, I'm just kidding.
Aiming.
So yeah, oh my gosh, I'm in a really amazing place right now with what I'm learning as well. To have a grid. Okay, so you were saying, oh my gosh, so many things.
Just the one.
Just
The one.
Just the one.
Surfacey.
Let's keep it surface. One of the things that you realize when you actually do get to the place where you can do miracles is that one of the first signs of evidence that you're not ready is that you keep testing whether or not you can. Right? When you know you can sit in a chair, you don't go over and like, let me test if I can sit in this chair. Right? So this is Jesus in the wilderness. If you're the Son of God, turn this stone to bread. Right? The giving into the test is the evidence you don't actually believe it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Giving into the desire to go practice walking on water is evidence that you're not ready to walk on water. When you know I can walk on water when I need to, that's a whole different ballgame. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And so there is a I don't know if I call it a game or if there's a dynamic inside of your mind and inside of your heart that true belief has no doubt. And we try to work ourselves up and work ourselves up and just get to this point where, okay, I have no doubt. Now let me go test it. And you're like, well, wait a minute. If you truly didn't have any doubt, you would have no need to prove it, right? To yourself or to anyone else. And so that's a little nugget. If you're somebody who's been trying to do things. Now, I'm not saying that you can't. I have heard stories of people who wanted to walk on water so bad that they would go down to the lake every day and they would work on it. And then one day it finally worked. That's doable. That is absolutely doable. And there's mechanisms in there. But for the most part, it is not about work really hard and spend years of your life to get there. It is about knowing that you're the type of person that you have an identity on such a level that when you need it, you have it. And let's be honest, like you don't know. I mean, how are you going to practice fixing broken arms?
Well,
Like,
I suppose.
hold out your arm, So really, it's when you need it. Do you have it at that moment?
Mm-hmm.
There are people who, I'm going to go practice raising the dead. I'm going to go to the morgue. Like, look, again, that's great. To a certain extent, you can find certain spiritual muscles. You can kind of understand a few, do some research, fill your mind with the understanding. You realize that revelation only comes filtered through the information that you have. Like I use this example, like I don't know anything about repairing vehicles. It's a really darn good chance. It's pretty good odds that I will never receive a revelation on how to build a really efficient engine, because I don't meditate on it, I don't study it, I don't think about it, because it's nothing that I've put any information into my mind about. Right? So getting revelation on the world's greatest, most efficient fueled engine is probably not going to land in my brain. It's going to land on the guy who meditates on engines day and night. Right? So if you want to understand power about anything, meditate on it, but not in the hard work, that hard work meditation thing going on. That's a very Eastern culture, which is beautiful, but they're a lot slower in these things. I'm reading a book right now by Miguel Ruiz where he actually outlines just, the difference between Western culture and Eastern culture, and how the Eastern cultures have a slower longevity approach to these spiritual things, and you spend your entire life mastering one thing. That's beautiful for that culture, but our Western culture is like, no thanks, I want to do it all, and I want to do it all in like 2 weeks. Great. Then start reading it, watch YouTube videos. You want to learn how to raise the dead? YouTube it. You want, Google it. Start talking to people who've done it. It's real. And meditate on it. Think about it. Talk about it with your friends while you're having dinner. And then at some point, do a podcast episode on it. But at some point, you realize that you have become the person who you've become the person who can do that when you need to. And it's actually a significantly more passive mechanism than you think. When you're trying really hard, keyword trying, not doing. Right? So there's my Yoda quote for the moment. Yeah.
I think, I've thought about that a lot as far as like the situation calling for the ability, or the situation bringing out the ability, I guess. And it's the kind of thing that I feel in my heart that I have, that something would rise up in me in certain kind of situations that I would be able to do what I needed to do. But at the same time, like there's various less urgent situations that come up where it feels like it should be working better than it is. And then I'm like, is the urgency part of the part of what pulls it out? And I feel like to some extent it is. But then at the same time, I also have beliefs like that I shouldn't need to be dealing with various things that come up sometimes, particularly talking about like little annoyances of various sickness type stuff. I don't get sick, but sometimes our kids do, or they show symptoms of it, or whatever you want to call it. And I have had what I feel like is some success in helping that get out of them quickly. But sometimes it's still an annoyance, and I feel like I guess this is going into a kind of a rabbit trail, but basically, yes, the point is I have thought a lot about the need and the urgency, bringing that out in somebody. And I mean, it does that physically, the adrenaline and stuff like that does that for people, for example, that need to lift heavy things, or those kinds of, like, we have, there's that stuff in us when it needs to be. But then I wonder too.
Okay.
Sorry, no, I was just going to finish by saying I wonder if there's never going to be a time where people are just using stuff matter-of-factly without necessarily a need. But I think of like Jesus walking on the water. You could say maybe he was going to teach people, the disciples, something. But to me, it just kind of looks like he was, I just want to get to the other side of the lake. Although at the same time, then you could think, well, he could have just translocated or whatever. So there was some sort of method to his madness, I suppose.
I think culturally it's really interesting to think about. Like a very tangible example of me is fasting. If you were to stay in this country here and you talk to people about fasting, a couple of days, like, can't do it, impossible, I'll die. Like, people think they will literally die if they don't eat food in like 3 days. Yet having, when you fast for that first day, and you're like, all right, well, I'm totally fine. And then it's very passive, just not doing it, not eating. Like day 3, day 4, day 5, week 1, week 2, week 3. And a lot of people just like that, like the collective conscious says that's not possible. Yet there are people that do it, and not just do it, they do it regularly. And then there's some people that take it even further. There's a gentleman we have curated in our library, Kirby DeLanerole, considers himself a breatharian. a guy who, and Austin, feel free to put me in check on this one, eats when it's like just for socially, every month or 2 or 3. I mean,
yeah. Yeah, he did. He went for very, very extended, long periods of time for spiritual reasons initially, and then now he and his wife and a bunch of people in his church, they just kind of live a lifestyle. Like sometimes they'll eat 2 or 3 meals in a row, and then sometimes they won't eat for weeks and weeks. And I think the longest he ever went was like 14 months or something, or 8 months. And then like 14 months, it was like, I think in 14 months he had like 3 meals or something like that. But yeah.
They seem
Imagine
to
all the money he's saving.
What?
I said, imagine how much money he's saving.
Right? And time?
Just have your kids fast through their teenage years, maybe. Or they eat you out of house and home.
And you can send them to college.
So I was going to say before, when Christina was mentioning like the adrenaline that causes super strength when we need it, like that still is showing us hints at what the body is truly capable of. Like that's in there. We're able to do those things. We just have to kind of unlock how that works. And I think that I know this is one of your points, but how movies and comics and stuff like that are kind of putting out the idea of superheroes, and that you do have to, like, before you used to have to be bitten by a radioactive spider or be super rich or all of these other things or born special. But I think now it's kind of slowly shifting towards like mundane people having supernatural abilities. And I think that it's kind of a beautiful process where those ideas are being planted in people, at least as a dream.
I mean, Glass.
Right.
The
Don't spoil it.
Spoiler alert from a previous episode.
Yeah.
Like that's exactly what it is. That Mr. Glass, he's the evil mastermind, and his theory is that all the comic books and all the stories of the gods and stuff are actually stories of real people that have just been, fantasized. I don't even.
Sure.
You get the point.
Sounds good.
Point.
I feel like there's a word in there that's really
Fancifulated.
normal. Yeah, they've been made fancy, and but that in reality they're covering up the truth of real people, and so then Glass is based on actually trying to reveal to the world that superheroes and superpowers are real, and so now you have a movie that is literally right on the nose on that. Like normal people have superpowers. And the world needs to know about it. And they've always had superpowers. And there's, reasons why people have tried to hide it. And they don't want humans to know what they're capable of. But people are doing it all the time. So I have a friend of mine was a missionary in Africa, is literally knows firsthand accounts of witch doctors flying through the air and crash landing to the ground.
Who's this?
Chris.
What?
Yeah, crash landing to the ground and like over a prayer circle, and they hit the airspace over the prayer where they were praying, and like the witch doctor landed and was like, "What'd you do?" Like he was butt naked too. Yeah.
He crashed.
That's one of the things you have to do. Huh? Yeah, he crash landed.
You have to be naked to fly. Take notes.
Only in that
You could
context.
arrest me if you could catch me.
My, what a big rudder you have, witch doctor.
Oh my word.
How do you steer? Well, anyway.
A big dong.
Yeah, we're back to dog. There we go. When you got Jesus walking on water, I do love that story because he gets in the boat and then immediately they're at the other side. So he literally walks on water and then relocates an entire boat.
That's right. I forgot about that.
Right? Which is pretty cool. You're like, you're just showing off at this point, dude. And he was glowing.
And he was glowing.
Right?
Yeah, that's
To
right.
see him like a ghost on the water.
That's true.
It was like glorified body walking on water, relocate. Bam, bam, bam. It's pretty awesome. Anyway, so, you've got these stories. I mean, if you've spent any time in the charismatic Christian circles, you can hear stories of people relocating, flying, walking on water. I've heard stories of a couple of missionaries that, They were going up into China, and they were trying to get into one of those tribes that's way back in the deep woods of China, and there was a flood on the river, and the bridge went out, and these guys ended up walking on the water to get over, and the whole village got saved because they were like, how did you get here? Like, well, we crossed the water, and they're like, no, there's no bridge. And they didn't say anything. They just they didn't want to be seen as like witch doctors and stuff. So they went back that night, and some of the tribes people like snuck in and saw them walking on the water. They came back the next day, again, walked on the water, and like the whole village got saved. So there's just story after story after story after story after story. What we're really trying to hit is, how do you do this on purpose? Right? How do you do this consistently? How do you do this regularly? Because I think that is the heart cry of humanity, is like, that's great if I can lift a car once. But like, what if I could have that strength whenever I need it or wanted it, not just needed it? And I think there is a massive shift in the conscious construct of humanity that is required. And, you know, it's for the journey I'm on, I'm very much kind of have a window into what that construct shift would look like. But in the end, you have to be able to touch pure energy, and you have to be able to manipulate it. That is how any miracle would ever work, right? So quantum physics is proving that. Spirituality has proved that. That there is and faith is an energy, belief is an energy. You have to be able to touch it purely, without the bias, without the doubt, without the fear. And in order to do that, you have to enter into a whole new realm of existence. Still on earth, heaven on earth, but the pure energy itself is love. I mean, it is God. It is the ether. And from there, once humanity can actually figure out how to live in that world, I think you will absolutely start seeing people do more and more and more and more. And not just when it's needed, but whenever they want to. And I think that's the switch over, that the ones that really stand out are the ones who can do it at will. And to this point, those ones typically have all that ritual, and that's what they focused on. It's really the only thing they can do. You know, the guy with the chi, right? He does the healing and everything like that. But, or the people with like their third eye and have some intuition and stuff like that. I mean, right now you kind of have to pick one and give your whole life to it. And we're saying, why? Like, I want to do them all. And I think that's possible, but you have to live in a different world at that point.
So, in a sense, are you saying that it's more of the Eastern style of research, spiritual research, is what's been closer to things than the Western style, if you will?
I think so. I mean, I think according to YouTube.
Well, I think Eastern is way older. It's ancient. Like, they've had time. Like, this is stuff that they've known forever. Like, Qigong has been around for 4,000 years. That type of energy channeling. And the West we're babies. So we've got to figure it out.
Well, I think part of that. Oh, go ahead.
I was just saying, the West, we're so heavy on the mind that, I mean, the West, we create superpowers by inventing. So guess what? We can fly. We just built machines to do it. And which is a whole other debate on whether or not that's any less of a superpower.
That's definitely part of it.
I mean, sorry, go ahead.
That's definitely part of it. I think also in the Western culture, largely, a lot of that stuff has been demonized and feared in a sense, or feared to push into it. And that's why I think it would be really helpful, or will be really helpful, once people can see, quote unquote, the science behind some of it, because then it'll take away some of that trepidation, hesitancy of, because I mean, when we recognize something as natural, then it's not concerning that something we can't see is manipulating, or you know what I mean?
Because it'll be demons.
Well,
right, exactly.
A lot of Sorry.
It's usually it's
the thing with this kind of stuff, especially here in the West, is we're very scientific method based, and so if you the gist of the scientific method is that you can put something to an experiment and replicate it and do it over and over and over again, and so we don't know enough about the spiritual, the way to do spiritual things, and on top of that, we can't. The things done in the spiritual sense are not things that we can touch. They're not things that can be measured well, I mean, I guess you could say that, but maybe not. But anyways, they're not things that can be measured in an empiric way, and so therefore the West sees all these things as hocus pocus type stuff, and so I feel like to reinforce what Christina says, once we can put science to it, then it can become more plausible for us in the West to actually start delving into these things and start working on them.
And that's what I really appreciate about Wim Hof. I mean, and I think I've seen his method kind of really take off here in the U.S. because, I mean, I got into Wim Hof 2016. We had the Epoch office, so I don't know what year that was. But I got into him, and his method, it relies on breathing, it relies on cold exposure, and Wim makes it a point to be observed in laboratory settings with, at universities, so that this stuff isn't just, a matter of lore, like, oh, look at this, what this guy can do. Like, he's running these marathons in the Arctic Circle in shorts. He's running marathons in the Sahara without water. He's swimming under the ice for record distances. Like, he's doing all these things in a verified fashion, and the scientific community is like right there to witness it. And not only that, but then when they say, well, it's just because you're an extraordinary individual, he like is very adamant. It's like, no, absolutely not. He's like, anybody can do this. And so they're like, well, okay, well, prove it. And so there was a test where he was able to suppress a immune response. He was able to control his autonomic system, and he brought in his students, and they were able to do the same exact thing, just doing his method. And I think that's been super helpful in bringing this forward. And it kind of, makes me more open to this whole talk that we're having right now, because it's, for me, it's still a big leap of faith. But, to see that when I hopped in and was just believing that this was possible, I watched, my breath retention times just skyrocket. I experienced what it was like to operate with that kind of breath. It was really impactful. Like, the only reason I don't do the Wim Hof method, like breathing all the time, is because it, like, my breath hold times got so long that it became like a huge endeavor. Like, I would have to like cut out huge blocks of time every day to breathe like 6 times. Like, it was,
wow,
it was intense.
Does he attribute much of his training to spiritual components?
Well, he says that cold is his teacher. Nature's his teacher. So I think he was dealing with depression initially, and he just spent some time out in the wilderness in the cold, if I recall right.
I'm wondering too if the difference between the Eastern's ability to do these spiritual things easier is, like, the West is built on like the freedom of religion, but it's like puritanical Christian stuff where there's all the condemnation for anything outside of, like, I don't my thoughts are not coming to me in order, but like
4 walls.
We have to have the scientific facts to be able to give ourselves permission to look into this. It seems like we can't just like, oh, it's just a spiritual thing, because those things are of the devil a lot of times, like out of the church and stuff like that. A lot of our natural human birthright abilities, like, who are you? Like, who are you to be able to walk on water? Like, there's a lot of condemnation that we're going to have to get past. So I'm wondering if that's why the West relies so heavily on the scientific part of it, because we have to prove that it's not spiritual, because then it would be, I don't even know.
It would be okay.
Well, it's nice to be able to say it like, well, if I'm crazy, then the science is crazy too. I mean, that's a nice crutch.
Yeah.
bear with me here, because I was actually listening to this this podcast earlier today, right before the meeting, and so
wait, you can time travel?
Yeah, it kind of put
this podcast.
Oh, this podcast.
No, the podcast. I guess it wasn't even a podcast. The podcast I was going to reference. Sorry. Anyways, the idea is that the Enlightenment. I feel like the Enlightenment is what has caused, or it might be one of the reasons why it caused the West to go more in the direction of reason, in the direction of things that can be physically proved, and so on and so forth. Because, and this was just a very quick Google right before I started talking, the gist of the Enlightenment was that anything that could be proven through logic was valid. Things that cannot be proved through logic are not valid. So that's why you get a whole lot of atheists and so on and so forth looking down on people that are in religion, or that, you know, talk about this stuff, and kind of seeing them as less intellectually capable in a sense, or they see religion as a crutch, or et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, that's my 2 cents. I think that a lot of the reason why in the West we're not as developed spiritually, if you will, the reasons are because of this Enlightenment period, I guess.
It's interesting that the science in all of it now is beginning to prove, though, that you don't have to abandon logic for miracles to take place, that things are connected in a way that we never anticipated. Or maybe some people anticipated, but
well, I mean, if you
folks didn't.
If you think about it, I mean, it was like I feel like a lot of these things people would think are so harebrained, so crazy sounding, that they must not be true, because there's no way that this could be true. And then all of a sudden, you know, as science advances, well, yeah, maybe it is true. Maybe this could happen. Maybe, you know, there is something like the whole spiritual realm or whatever. I mean, I don't think we even have started to touch quantum physics or anything of the sort, even began to understand how all that stuff works and all the different possibilities and so on and so forth. And, you know, 100 years ago, that stuff was like bogus. I mean, the atom, how long have we been able to actually know about the atom and know that there were smaller particles in that? I mean,
yeah, I feel like when I was in school, it was the atom.
Yeah, maybe so. I don't know.
Right.
And now it's already not, you know, like that's not the smallest thing anymore. So.
All right, so we've been going for about an hour now. Anybody want to go through anything we missed? Final thoughts around the circle?
Definitely. I would say that superpowers are real. They're obtainable, and they're all up to the individual to create a path for that, and a belief system. And yeah, that's what I would say.
I think for me, the two parting thoughts is, one, you know, if you can think about it, you can do it, in the sense of creative thought enters into the mind of mankind, and our capacity and our likeness as offspring of God makes all things possible, truly. How you go about it, I do think that it's, you know, certain things, I think in human invention, airplanes and tractor, I mean, we move mountains all the time with bulldozers. I mean, it's just, you know, so there's different ways to achieve whatever we can think, but I believe that when you want to look at superpowers and the ability to move a mountain without using a bulldozer, still possible. There's stories. Thomas did it in India, the Apostle Thomas, but look it up. And then the other component would be that as you open your mind to the potential for whatever it is, you will find, I believe you will find certain bents that you have, certain things that come more naturally to you than others. And if you don't know where to start with the things that are most intriguing to you. Google it, Google miracles, Google powers, fill your brain with information so that your heart can meditate on it and follow that. Start with something that is near and dear to your heart and your identity, and then, move further and further out from that center. And you'll find that you begin to attract more and more understanding that makes each consecutive level of power that much more approachable, because you have a foundation for how to do certain things, and you just keep moving out.
I had a really good point, and Austin made me forget it because this was better. What he said. No, but I do think we're capable of anything, really. I think that there's a lot of framework in place via the universal consciousness of beliefs that we have limits. Like gravity is important, but it's still an agreement that we have. Well, we won't get into that. Never mind. Cut that out then.
He's not cutting it out.
I think that we can do anything. I do. I think that we just need a combination of science, which will help us ground the beliefs that we'll need to prove that it's possible, I guess, and then move from there. And I think that humanity as a whole is ripe for this type of shift. And I think that we're going to start seeing more things. And with the digital age and robots taking over our jobs, we'll have a lot more time to devote to learning how to walk on water. Or, I guess if we're waiting until we need to. I don't know.
I think, just energetically speaking, we would do well to stop calling them superpowers in the first place. Because they should just be natural.
Abilities?
Yeah, abilities. Skill sets. I don't know. I think it's going to be really interesting to see different schools come about for those types of skills. And there are already various schools in existence. I'll probably have some of them in my article. But yeah, I don't know. It's just a lot of interesting things to think about. But for myself, I'm basically just trying to frame how I think about them differently.
I think the key there is framing how you think about these things, and not think of them as something that's impossible, not scoff at these ideas because of your experience up to this time, and basically approach these things, approach this new age with an open mind. And that's that.
I think miracles are called miracles because we don't fully understand how they happened, and they come at a clutch moment. I know just from the little bit of time that I spent, learning from the teachings of Tom Brown of the tracker fame, I learned there were parts of myself that I didn't even realize existed. I didn't realize how to tap into them. And I think the more time we spend acknowledging that there is untapped potential in us, and we allow ourselves to indulge in that, interesting things are going to happen. So, as always, there's more stuff in our blogs. If anybody's points really caught you, their stuff's in a blog on theepoch.org. theepoch.org. And thanks for tuning in. See you next week.